Good afternoon, everyone. It's a sunny 3 p.m. in the metro. I hope you are well and relaxed this afternoon as I welcome you to our virtual podcast where we delve into a fascinating world of language acquisition and the theories that shape our understanding of how we learn to communicate. This is Still the Tea with Liyan, and I am your host today. We have two special guests joining us, Dr. Lorraine S, a linguist specializing in second language acquisition, and Dr. Debie Arroyo, a psychologist with a focus on cognitive development. Welcome to the show, our special guests.
Thank you, Ms. Liyan, for inviting us here in your podcast show. It's fun to be.
Thank you for inviting us, Miss Liyan.
It's my pleasure to have you here in this podcast today. So, we will be exploring Vygotsky's interactionist theory of language acquisition and comparing it with other prominent theories, specifically Chomsky's universal grammar and Skinner's behaviorist theory. Let's start with Vygotsky. Dr. Arenas, can you give us a brief overview of Vygotsky's interactionist theory?
Of course, Ms. Liyan, Vygotsky's interactionist theory emphasized the crucial role of social interaction in cognitive development. He proposed that language acquisition occurs through collaborative dialogue between children and more knowledgeable others, such as parents, teachers, or peers. A key concept in his theory is the zone of proximal development, or ZPD, which refers to the difference between what a child can do independently and what they can achieve with guidance and encouragement from a skilled partner.
That is fascinating, Dr. Arenas. Now let's proceed to Dr. Arroyo. So, how does Vygotsky's theory challenge your views on language acquisition?
Before diving into Vygotsky's work, I primarily view language acquisition through the lens of cognitive development. As a largely individual process, Vygotsky emphasizes on social interaction and the idea that learning is inherently a collaborative process was eye-opening. It made me realize how much we learn from our environment and the people around us.
That's well input, Dr. Arroyo. Now let's move back to Dr. Arenas. How did Vygotsky's theory enhance your understanding of the relationship between language and language acquisition?
Vygotsky's theory helped me see the dynamic nature of language learning. It's not just about internal cognitive mechanism, but also about the interactions and the cultural context in which a child is immersed. The concept of scaffolding, where a more knowledgeable other provides support to help the learner accomplish a task, is so crucial in understanding how language skills develop progressively.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Arenas. Now let's contrast this with Chomsky's universal grammar. Dr. Arroyo, how does Chomsky's theory differ from Vygotsky's?
Chomsky's universal grammar posits that the ability to acquire language is innate, and that all humans are born with a set of grammatical principles common to all languages. This theory suggests that language learning is primarily an internal process driven by our biological makeup rather than external social interactions. Unlike Vygotsky, who emphasized the environment and social context, Chomsky focused on the inborn structures of the mind.
Hmm, okay, so to you, Dr. Arenas, how do these differences shape your view of language acquisition?
The stark contrast between these theories highlights the complexity of language acquisition. While Chomsky's theory underscores the innate aspects of language learning, Vygotsky's approach brings attention to the importance of social interactions and cultural context. Both perspectives are valuable, and considering them together provides a more comprehensive understanding of how a language develops.
Okay, now that we have an insightful understanding about what is social interactionist theory of Lev Vygotsky, let us now proceed to the last theory that will be discussed by Dr. Arenas. Let's now touch on Skinner's behaviorist theory. Now, Dr. Arenas, how does Skinner's view compare to Vygotsky's?
Skinner's behaviorist theory emphasizes learning through conditioning. According to Skinner, language acquisition is a result of imitation, practice, reinforcement, and habituation. This theory focuses on observable behaviors and external stimuli, whereas Vygotsky's theory involves internal cognitive processes and social interactions, while behaviorism highlights the role of reinforcement and repetition. It doesn't account for the deeper cognitive and social dimensions that Vygotsky's theory addresses.
Okay, now let's ask Dr. Arroyo. How do these similarities and differences between Vygotsky's and Skinner's theory influence your perspective on language acquisition?
The behaviors approach emphasizes on reinforcement and practice aligns with some practical aspects of learning. But it feels limited when considering the full scope of language development. One of the examples of this theory is the 3-year-old boy whose native language is the Cebuano language or the Baweño Bisaya variation in the Philippines. Pseudonym Yugi, based on the observation and interviews conducted with the child and the parents, some important characteristics in his language development were revealed. With reference to the first research question, Yugi acquired the language through innateness. He perceived linguistic units and communication outputs in various linguistic tasks. It is innateness that made him capable of communicative interaction and understanding, since without the brain, the processing unit of humans, enables Yugi to correspond to some linguistic units. When Yugi mother is asked about how her child came up with the bits of linguistic units, she expressed, Yugi learned new words and sentences that are faulty. This is the fact that the child has no formal language instruction. Some faulty sentences or utterances, the nurture or the environment of the child is not underscored but is also given importance in his first language acquisition. Imitation, correction, and reinforcement, analogy, and structure, inputs have significant roles in the child's first language development. In the case of Yugi, imitation worked out for him to pick up linguistic units from his environment. He used to make use of words that he heard and understand from his family. For instance, during observation, his father uttered a vulgar expression, which he then uttered promptly despite his incomprehension of its meaning. The study of Hutaruk in 2015 revealed significant findings in her case study on children's problem learning their first language, age 1 to 3 years old. These identified problems, according to her, depend largely on vital factors, such as the environment and exposure to prints or the family itself. Moreover, she emphasizes that children acquire the language using the sequential stages of native language. For example, the cooing, babbling, holoplastic, two-word telegraphic, or latter multi-word. Vygotsky theory, with its focus on social interaction and the CPD, offers a more nuanced view that incorporates both cognitive and social factors. It challenges the behaviorist perspective by demonstrating that language learning is not just about stimulus and response, but also about meaningful and support from others.
Thank you, Dr. Debie, for sharing Yogi's case about his first language acquisition. We now have a more understanding on how children acquire language and how can we guide them into acquiring language more effectively. Now, on the other side, let's dig a bit deeper into how these theories have influenced and challenged your understanding of language acquisition. Dr. Arenas, can you give us or provide us an example of how Vygotsky's social interaction theory has deepened your understanding of language learning?
One example is the process of learning new vocabulary through social interactions. In a classroom setting, a teacher might introduce new words through a story or a conversation, providing context and using gestures to aid understanding. This aligns with Vygotsky's idea of scaffolding, where the teacher supports the student in a way that makes the learning task achievable. Before studying Vygotsky, I viewed vocabulary acquisition as a more isolated activity, where repetition and memorization were key. Now I see how critical the social context and interactive dialogue are in making new words meaningful and memorable.
That's a great example, Dr. Arenas. Now, Dr. Debbie, how has Skinner's behaviorist theory influenced your view on language acquisition?
Skinner's behaviorist theory helped me appreciate the importance of reinforcement in learning. For example, when a child says a word correctly and receives praise or a positive response, they are more likely to repeat the word and learn it effectively. This reinforcement strengthens the behavior. However, before exploring Vygotsky theory, I underestimated the role of social interactions and cultural context. Behaviorism provided a foundational understanding, but it felt somewhat mechanical and lacked the richness that Vygotsky theory brought into the picture.
Okay, now for you, Dr. Arenas, how did these theories challenge your views on language acquisition before you studied them in depth?
Initially, I leaned heavily on the idea that language learning was mostly about internal cognitive process and repetition. Chomsky's universal grammar resonated with me because it explained the innate ability to learn language. However, Vygotsky's and Skinner's theories highlighted the social and environmental factors that are equally important. The realization that children learn through social interactions and that reinforcement plays a significant role broadened my perspective. It challenged the notion that language acquisition is purely an internal process and showed me how interconnected our cognitive development is with our social experiences.
Okay, thank you. Now, Dr. Arroyo. Dr. Debbie, any final thoughts on how these theories have shaped your understanding of language acquisition?
This theory collectively underscored that language acquisition is a multifaceted process. Vygotsky emphasizes on social interaction and cultural context add depth to the behaviors focused on reinforcement and repetition. It's not about choosing one theory over the other, but integrating insights from all these perspectives to get a holistic view of how language is learned. This integration has significantly enhanced my understanding and approach to studying and teaching language acquisition.
Thank you both for such an enlightening discussion. To wrap up, it's clear that understanding language acquisition requires considering multiple theories: Vygotsky's interactionist theory, Chomsky's universal grammar, and Skinner's behaviorist theory. Each offer a unique insight that, when combined, provides a richer picture of how we learn to communicate. Thank you, Dr. Arenas and Dr. Arroyo, our special guests for today, for joining our virtual podcast. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Spill the Tea with Liyan. Until next time, keep exploring the wonders of language. Thank you. Have a great day.